How can you be so soft and yet so terrifying when crossed? Why does your energy embrace like a healer, yet your silence shakes the very air? When you're disrespected, you feel it, don't you? That moment when someone underestimates your light and then flinches when it reveals its full weight. You weren't trying to prove anything, you were just done. And when a chosen one is done, the atmosphere knows it. If your calm has ever exposed what chaos tried to hide, they never expected the soul who prays for their enemies to also carry the sword of sacred consequences. They saw the kindness but not the covenant. They felt the warmth but missed the warning. They forgot that mercy from a chosen one is not weakness, it's a grace period. And when that grace expires, heaven steps in with full authority. To every beautiful soul who's been showing love, especially through your support, I honor you. You are not just supporting words, you're upholding a frequency this world desperately needs. This message is for those praised for their kindness until that kindness was mistaken for submission. For those who've healed others, held back their thunder, and walked away not out of weakness, but out of sacred restraint. Why is your sweetness so disarming, yet your withdrawal so devastating? Why does your presence feel like peace, but your boundaries sound like prophecy? Keep reading. The answers are spiritual. Once you understand them, you'll never apologize again for being both gentle and untouchable. God's chosen ones, why are you the kindest souls and also the most feared when challenged? Some people walk into a room and without uttering a word, the atmosphere bends in reverence. It's not charisma or charm, it's frequency, the invisible geometry of their soul, shifting the vibration of everyone around them. Their silence speaks louder than noise. Their calm rearranges chaos. Their eyes hold the knowledge of storms they never narrated. You are one of them. You've been misunderstood because of the weightlessness you carry. People assumed gentleness meant powerlessness. They mistook grace for weakness. But what they never saw was that your softness was not a lack of force. It was restraint, mastery, divine strength wrapped in velvet light. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. What if your quietness was always a form of spiritual governance? What if you weren't sent to dominate, but to recalibrate in psychological terms? Your presence functions like a nervous system regulator. The room harmonizes when you enter. Empaths and trauma bearers feel safe near you. Though they cannot explain it, the trees know this type of energy. The lion doesn't roar unless needed. The sunflower turns gently but with precision toward light, just like you. Chosen one. People sense you carry something ancient. You listen without preparing a rebuttal, see without seeking to expose, and perceive truths before people have language for them. This is not learned behavior. It is an encoded calling, refined through silence, rejection, and deep knowing. You are not driven by ego, but by assignment. You remind people of the divine, which is why you are loved and feared. Your kindness isn't performative, it's perceptive. It sees through masks, holds space without enabling dysfunction, and loves without losing self. Let your gentleness be evident to all. For the Lord is near, Philippians 4:5. But when pushed, lied to consistently, betrayed without repentance. Or when boundaries are violated repeatedly, your energy changes form not from hate, but from holy fire, not from pride, but from prophetic truth. You do not react emotionally, you respond spiritually. Like Jesus flipping the tables in the temple, not out of impulse, but divine justice. Matthew 21:12-13. Have they ever asked why your silence feels like thunder once you're pushed too far? Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing, was a quiet revolutionary. She rarely spoke publicly, but her data, presence, and persistence changed global health systems. Her kindness saved lives, but her strategy terrified those who clung to archaic power. You carry the same paradox. Your presence soothes the broken, but shakes the corrupt. Contrast this with Enron CEO Jeffrey Skilling, whose charm masked corporate fraud. He smiled in public, but manipulated behind closed doors. Eventually sentenced to prison, his legacy crumbled under the weight of deceit. His downfall was not loud. It was just you, chosen one, may not wear titles, but you carry truth. And that truth makes people tremble once they realize you will no longer tolerate manipulation. You don't explode, you withdraw. And when you do, the architecture of relationships shifts because your presence was the glue. Your exit is a prophecy in a small town. A woman named Sarai used to bring meals to her neighbors every Sunday. She never spoke much, but her care was like morning dew, gentle, persistent. One day, she stopped coming. People laughed, called her dramatic, but within weeks, conflicts erupted in homes she used to visit, and depression returned to people she used to check in on. Sarai's absence wasn't petty, it was power, and they felt it. Do they know what breaks inside the atmosphere when someone like you stops showing up? In the book of Proverbs, it says, "A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit." Proverbs 15:4. You've been the tree of life for many, but now discernment is pruning your branches. Not everyone gets to rest in your shade anymore. Some must feel the desert they created. Have they noticed the pattern that when a chosen one leaves, disarray begins? You are not cold, you are calculated in spirit. You are not distant, you are discerning. You are not vengeful, you are vision-filled. Those who tried to provoke your lower self are now confused because, instead of engaging, you evolved. That's what frightens them most, your transformation. Jesus himself was misunderstood, called a rebel, a threat, a blasphemer. But when the crowd shouted, he remained silent, Mark the 15:5. That kind of silence is heavy. It echoes through spiritual realms. When you stop explaining, start walking, and keep rising, they know something shifted. In the laws of thermodynamics, energy never disappears, it only transforms. Your energy, once used to rescue, is now fueling revelation. This is why you feel lighter, but more potent. Why your joy is returning, but no longer naive. Why you protect your time as if it's sacred because it is. You are no longer available for false urgency, no longer a responder to unhealed noise. Your soul has undergone frequency realignment. You don't just hear voices, you discern them. You don't just serve, you steward. That's why you don't need to raise your voice anymore. Your vibration is doing the work. You carry a light that doesn't only comfort, it confronts. You never asked to be a revealer, but truth lives so deeply in you that it radiates without permission. It doesn't just illuminate beauty, it reveals distortion. Being near you, chosen one, is a spiritual X-ray. It feels like healing to the honest, but unbearable to the false. Why do some smile in your presence, yet distance themselves over time? Why do others feel suddenly seen without you speaking a word? Because you don't seek to uncover anyone. Your very being becomes a mirror. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. You don't expose with words, you expose by existing. Your frequency vibrates with such congruence that anything misaligned begins to shake, crack, and unravel without your involvement. Psychologically, this mirrors cognitive dissonance. When someone's internal belief system clashes with your consistent authenticity, their nervous system interprets it as discomfort, even a threat. You didn't challenge them, truth did. The ocean doesn't try to drown false anchors. It just pulls everything unstable to the surface. Just like you. In ancient scripture, the prophet Daniel was not a warrior, but a revealer. When King Belshazzar surrounded himself with deception and pride, it was Daniel gentle, wise, steady, who interpreted the writing on the wall that none could understand. Daniel 5. You are like that, a translator of divine patterns, a carrier of codes others try to avoid. You don't speak to please, you resonate with purpose. In modern history, Cardinal Joseph Menzenti of Hungary became a symbol of unwavering faith during communist oppression. He didn't fight with fists, he stood with truth. His silence in the face of propaganda shook regimes. Like you, he did not shame the enemy, he simply would not be moved, eventually imprisoned. His spirit outlasted the system. That's the power of unshakable presence. Contrast this with Bernie Madoff, once a respected financier, whose charm masked one of the largest frauds in history. His empire collapsed when one truth emerged. His carefully curated image couldn't survive accountability. The same light that comforts also convicts. You don't force change, you become change. And that alone creates discomfort in the dissonant, in a distant village. A teacher named Eloa walked quietly between market stalls every morning. She rarely spoke of her beliefs, but people whispered about her eyes, how they saw through excuses. One day, the town mayor, who secretly misused community funds, banned her from attending meetings, claiming she was disruptive. But nothing she did was loud. Her presence made dishonesty tremble. Months later, the truth emerged, and it was her absence that first made the town question leadership. She didn't accuse, she simply stopped showing up. Do they realize what kind of inner turbulence truth can trigger in someone clinging to illusion? Your stillness has volume. Your energy is a tuning fork that causes every lie nearby to sound off pitch. It's not about confrontation, it's about resonance, as in string theory. When one string vibrates, others of the same frequency begin to vibrate too. But those out of harmony fracture. You're not destroying, you're revealing, and that difference is sacred. Why do some run from you and call you too much when all you did was stand in truth? You've learned that you don't need to call out falsehood to make it tremble. Your boundaries whisper things some consciences are not ready to hear. You show up with honesty, and masks begin to itch, not because you judge, but because your soul refuses to perform. Even Jesus stirred discomfort without raising his voice. "I am the light of the world," he said. "Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness." John 8:12. Light doesn't force anyone to change, but it makes hiding impossible. This is your cross. Chosen one. You never asked to be the revealer, but your purity became the prophecy. Some feel relief next to you, others unease. Your presence activates what's dormant in them, not through pressure, but through purity. Sometimes people cry around you without knowing why. Sometimes they avoid eye contact. Sometimes they confess secrets you never asked for. Why? Because truth doesn't need a podium, it needs a vessel. And that's what you are. The truth you carry is not sharp like a sword, but deep like a current. It doesn't wound, it reveals. That revelation can feel like either home or confrontation, depending on how much the other person has avoided seeing themselves. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs 25. You don't need to say, "I know." Your eyes already whisper it, not with pride, but with precision. Your gaze carries a diagnostic frequency, like a resonance scan in quantum physics, detecting hidden density where others only see surface light. And yet, you love anyway. You keep showing up with kindness, even when what you see is manipulation, projection, or fear. You continue embracing people until the dishonesty makes it impossible to remain. This rare blend of sweetness and spiritual discernment is your signature. You're both a healer and a revealer. You love with gentleness, but discern with laser clarity. You feel frequencies others ignore. Hear subtext in silence. Sense intentions masked behind gestures. Why do they call you too much? Because your presence calls people into full visibility, and many aren't ready. The prophet Samuel was such a soul, young yet spiritually awake. When Eli couldn't hear God's voice, it was Samuel who received the divine call first. For Samuel 3, he didn't demand authority, his authenticity attracted it. Later, when the people of Israel asked for a king, it was Samuel who discerned the cost. He saw behind the glitter of Saul's stature and felt the spiritual fracture before it manifested. Like you, he loved people but didn't ignore their patterns. In our time, Desmond Tutu, the South African bishop and anti-apartheid activist, embodied this tension between mercy and clarity. He extended forgiveness, but not at the cost of accountability. His Truth and Reconciliation Commission was built on this paradox: love with limits, comfort with confrontation. Those who came into his presence felt both safety and scrutiny. The process was sacred. Some were healed, others resisted and exposed themselves. But not everyone handles truth well. Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as the next Steve Jobs, built a medical empire on charisma and secrecy. When truth confronted the illusion she built, her empire collapsed. Her need to control perception couldn't survive transparency. The longer the persona was defended, the harsher the fall became. That's the consequence of rejecting truth. when it knocks gently the first time. In a quiet monastery in the hills of Catalonia, a woman named Leora tended a garden every day in silence. She spoke few words, but had eyes that read through wounds. One pilgrim, a wealthy businessman running from disgrace, came to the monastery seeking peace. He avoided Leora until one afternoon, passing her near the rosemary plants. She simply said, "The weight you carry is not guilt, it's the fear of being seen." Days later, he wept and left transformed. She had no intention to awaken him, but truth doesn't ask for permission, it just is. You, chosen one, awaken souls without trying. That's why you're misunderstood. Your hugs feel like therapy. Your silence feels like confession. Your laughter carries lightness, but your stillness penetrates. Are they ready to be seen? Can they stand the reflection your spirit casts without defense? Will they embrace the unraveling as liberation, or retreat into old masks again? The universe, or rather, heaven itself speaks through your presence. Are you ready to see things as they really are? John 8:32. Not all are, but those who are never forget you. You do not carry judgment in your expression, but you carry gravity. The Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth. John 16:13. Where truth is, illusions cannot survive. For the Word of God is alive and active. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. Your energy heals not by flattery, but by clarity. It consoles not by sugarcoating, but by sitting with the unspoken. You are a walking invitation to depth, and depth always demands honesty. In biological ecosystems, light doesn't just nurture, it reveals rot beneath the surface. In psychology, this is shadow work, the integration of unconscious patterns that surface when triggered by light. So keep being what you are. Keep walking as a contradiction, soft but unyielding, tender yet sharp. Your ability to both embrace and awaken is what makes you holy. There is no atmosphere for games where you dwell. No oxygen left for masks. No ecosystem for manipulation to survive. Where your soul stands, all that is false begins to decay, not because you expose anything with words, but because your frequency exposes distortion. You carry a spiritual calibration within you. The moment you enter a space, everything begins to tune itself, either toward alignment or away from you. That's what happens when a truth frequency meets dissonance. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. When truth arrives, it often hurts before it heals, but it does heal, just like the antiseptic sting before a wound begins to close. You, chosen one, are that antiseptic. You didn't choose this. You were assigned it. Have you ever been pushed away without cause, misunderstood by people you loved deeply, walked into a room and felt it tighten, then loosen again after you left? It wasn't about your personality. It was your spiritual presence confronting what was fragmented. Your light wasn't too much. It was uncompromising. Jesus in his hometown of Nazareth was rejected, not because of offense, but because of the clarity he carried. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. Mark 6:4. People often love the illusion of healing more than the process itself. And when you show up embodying the real thing, it breaks their spell. Fred Rogers, known as Mr. Rogers, was a television host and minister whose gentle presence carried profound emotional impact. Children and adults felt safe with him, not because he told them who to be, but because his energy allowed them to be. His authenticity created space for truth to emerge. He was mocked, criticized, and ridiculed by those uncomfortable with his softness. But over time, his impact became undeniable. That's the quiet legacy of the chosen. Contrast this with Jordan Belfort, the infamous Wolf of Wall Street, who manipulated, deceived, and seduced people into financial ruin for his gain. He wore charm as a weapon and played games until the games collapsed. When truth confronted his empire, the crash was seismic. That's what happens when charisma tries to impersonate character. In a coastal village, a midwife named Salma was known not for what she said, but for how people felt near her. Women in labor calmed in her presence. Children with fevers stopped crying when she entered the room. She never advertised her work, yet people sought her out like seekers searching for a sacred spring. One night, a grieving father arrived with his lifeless infant. Salma held the child, whispered prayers, and stayed in stillness. Nothing changed on the outside, but the father left with peace he hadn't known in years. What was it? Not magic, just presence. Truth. Light. Your presence works the same. Souls don't always understand what's happening, but they feel it. They're either magnetized toward you or repelled away, not because of who you are, but because of what your presence makes visible. Have you blamed yourself for their exit? Questioned whether your love was too strong, too silent, too present? It wasn't your fault. It was the weight of the real. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. Maybe you, too, have been healed by someone who said little but made you feel whole again. Maybe someone entered your life, and without advice or judgment, their eyes said, "You are safe." Now, you understand why souls recognize one another, and truth always knows its reflection. You are not just carrying truth. You are truth, walking in silence. Silence, as acoustic engineers will tell you, isn't emptiness, it's the presence of all sound, perfectly aligned. That's what you are to others, not absence, but alignment, like a snow leopard in the high Himalayas. Your power is quiet but undeniable. You are rare and deeply felt, like a tall tree with deep roots. Your presence stabilizes even in storms. Birds may land, people may rest in your shade, and still, you do not boast, you simply are. So continue. You don't have to prove your light, just stay lit. The chosen tend to wait long past the moment others would have walked away. They carry a patience that seems otherworldly, an inner spaciousness that listens through pain, waits through insult, and watches through betrayal without collapsing. You, chosen one, have likely been the silent witness to storms others created, and yet you stayed not because you lacked options, but because your soul was anchored in something higher than ego. You weren't trapped. You were trusting, and you're waiting. You were sowing a kind of love this world rarely understands: patient, steady, sacrificial. But do not mistake this stillness for submission. What appears passive on the surface is often the discipline of restraint, a fruit born only from deep spiritual maturity. This restraint does not come from weakness, but from knowing that not every war deserves a warrior, and not every provocation deserves a reply. There is wisdom in not reacting, power in not engaging, and divinity in holding your ground with grace. You felt the temptation to strike back, but chose instead to ascend. What most call silence, heaven calls strategy, and that restraint became your shield. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Proverbs 16:32. You have endured moments where you saw clearly but chose not to strike. Or why? Because you understand every soul is in process, wrestling their own unseen battles. You've learned to look beneath the mask, to discern not just behavior, but brokenness. Your discernment isn't cold analysis, it's sacred seeing. You saw the wounded child inside the adult's aggression, the trauma beneath the cruelty. That's why you withheld judgment, even when it would have been justified. Is it possible that your silence was the loudest love you could give? Have you ever held back a truth? Not because you feared conflict, but because you knew they weren't ready to hear it yet. This kind of patience is not natural, it is spiritual. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. James 3:17. Your mercy is a manifestation of this heavenly wisdom. You are living proof that gentleness is not weakness, but wisdom clothed in softness. When others expected a storm, you offered shade. When others triggered fury, you chose to intercede in secret. That is what makes you dangerous in the spirit, your ability to delay power for the sake of peace. The chosen often grant second chances, even third ones. They open the door again when everyone else has locked it shut, not because they are naive, but because they believe in the frequency of transformation. They've felt it in themselves, lived the process of being refined. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. Peter 3:9. They remember when God waited for them, their own betrayals, and the arms that still welcome them home. That memory makes them merciful, not permissive, but redemptive. You have become a mirror of that divine patience, embodying the delay of judgment. Not because you lack discernment, but because you value redemption more than revenge. You are not pretending not to see. You are choosing to love anyway. That kind of spiritual delay often feels invisible, but it reshapes timelines in the unseen. You have interceded in silence for those who didn't even know you were protecting them from themselves. Irene Sendler, a Polish social worker and underground resistance hero during World War II, rescued over 2,500 Jewish children from the Warsaw Ghetto. Despite arrest and torture by the Nazis, she refused to betray any information. Her patience was not passive, it was strategic. It gave time for salvation. Her silence was protective. Her faith in human transformation never left her. Even in the face of inhumanity, she understood what it meant to wait in the dark for the right moment to act. That's the kind of discernment that only comes from an awakened conscience and a heaven-born resolve. But you also need to know this: every sacred patience has a boundary line. There comes a moment when grace becomes grief. When your compassion starts to feel like a compromise, that is not failure. That is your soul alerting you that the season has shifted. Even mercy has a threshold. Elizabeth, a private school teacher, once mentored a troubled teenager named Aiden who lashed out in class, skipped assignments, and mocked her kindness. Still, she offered him grace week after week. Her colleagues called her foolish, but she saw a flicker of pain behind his sarcasm. One day, Aiden broke down, admitted to abuse at home, and asked for help. Her silence had saved him. She had waited long enough for his mask to fall, and when it did, she was the only one left standing beside him. That is the legacy of the chosen. Their faith fills the gaps that logic cannot reach. When the breakthrough comes, their patience becomes sacred soil where healing takes root. Contrast this with Milo, a charismatic executive who kept pushing the patience of every soul around him. He exploited leniency, twisted mercy into manipulation, and assumed that no consequence meant no accountability, until a whistleblower stepped forward, and Milo's empire unraveled overnight. Truth delayed is not truth denied, and when justice arrives, it moves swiftly. For too long, he mistook kindness for compliance, forgiveness for forgetfulness. But what he didn't know was this: when the chosen walk away, heaven follows. And when they stop covering you, the exposure begins. Like tectonic plates, patience builds invisible pressure beneath the surface. There may be no signs, no rumblings, until the shift comes. And when it comes, the entire landscape changes. That's how spiritual boundaries work. Steady, silent, then seismic. Once the quake begins, there is no turning back. The ground you once tolerated can no longer hold your spirit. That's when the Lord lifts you not as punishment to them, but as protection for you. Have you reached your spiritual threshold with someone? Have you realized that patience without truth becomes participation in dysfunction? Jesus, full of mercy, flipped the temple tables. Even he had moments where silence was no longer sacred and confrontation became necessary. My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of thieves. Matthew 21:13. That outburst wasn't rage. It was divine boundary. Jesus didn't flip tables for offense. He flipped them for alignment. When sacred spaces are violated, spiritual boundaries become sacred acts. Sometimes, the holiest thing you can do is disrupt what dishonors the presence of God, just like the owl who sits in stillness, watching the dark. You too have waited and watched, but when the moment is right, the owl does not hesitate. It swoops with precision. The chosen carry the same balanced stillness and strength, mercy and motion. The delay is not denial, it is calibration. You've been studying without speaking. And when you move, it's not out of mood, but out of mandate. You move because heaven says now. Your stillness is not permission. Your kindness is not a loophole. Your grace is not forever. To those who misread you, your peace was never their entitlement. Your loyalty was never their license. When you leave, it will not be petty, it will be prophetic. So let this truth settle within you. You have given what you could, waited long enough. When your silence ends, it will not be noise, it will be justice. It will not be a tantrum, it will be a trumpet. What falls afterward was never built on truth anyway. Your exit will not be your weakness, it will be your witness. For everything, there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be silent and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3:1-7. Chosen one, your time is approaching. When the chosen realize they are being disrespected in a conscious, repeated, and abusive way, they shift not with drama, not with fury, but with a deep and irreversible silence. They don't explode outward, they implode inward. That implosion is not collapse, it is clarity. The sacred moment when discernment overtakes emotion. When spiritual intelligence silences emotional investment. You don't raise your voice, you lower your access. You don't punish. They simply lose the privilege of proximity. This kind of shutting down is not a passive-aggressive move. It's a final verdict rendered after many internal appeals. You already tried communication, gave the benefit of the doubt, prayed, forgave, waited. But something in your spirit began to warn you are now sacrificing your soul to keep someone else comfortable in their chaos. Is that truly what you were chosen for? When you walk away, the silence becomes seismic, not because you wish harm, but because your presence was a stabilizer. Your energy held atmospheres together. And when you leave, the imbalance becomes obvious. Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Matthew 7:6. You begin to understand that love without boundaries is self-betrayal in disguise. You may have been called cold, disconnected, or selfish by those who once depended on your emotional labor. But how many chances did they expect you to give while refusing to grow? How many times did they test your capacity without ever honoring your value? Why do some only feel your worth after you're gone? British author and speaker Brené Brown once said, "Boundaries are not a wall. They are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." You, chosen one, learn this the hard way. You didn't leave because you stopped loving. You left because you started loving yourself too. But let's look at the other side. Matteo, a well-known spiritual coach, repeatedly ignored red flags in his inner circle. He excused manipulation as misunderstanding and extended endless grace, hoping people would change. One day, the very ones he protected turned on him publicly, twisting his silence into complicity. His refusal to set boundaries became the reason for his collapse. What was once mercy turned into martyrdom. In contrast, Emmanuel, a quiet janitor in a bustling hospital, showed kindness to all smiles, greetings, small acts of service. But when a new supervisor mocked him daily, Emmanuel didn't respond with retaliation. He simply asked for a transfer, left the floor, and never returned. Months later, that floor's morale plummeted. What people once overlooked, they now missed. Emmanuel was never just the janitor. He was the spiritual thermostat. You are that thermostat, regulating the emotional climate of rooms without trying. When you leave, the temperature shifts, like a tree that gave shade to everyone, unaware of its roots until it's cut down. Only then do people realize how much it buffered the heat. Have you ever walked away quietly and later watched everything unravel behind you? Have you ever felt guilty for leaving, but knew staying would have meant your slow spiritual death? Your decision to withdraw isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. Proverbs 12:16. You learn to discern between temporary offenses and toxic patterns. When the pattern repeats, so does your wisdom. Jesus withdrew from certain crowds, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5-16. Why? Because presence is sacred, and even he protected his energy. Even he did not remain where honor was absent. In the animal world, the octopus is a master of silent exits. When a predator threatens its peace, it releases ink and disappears into a new space. It does not fight to prove its worth. It simply relocates. So do you. So must you. When you do, something sacred happens. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Your absence becomes your loudest justice, not because you wished for destruction, but because your presence was a covering. When the covering is gone, consequences rush in. You are not replaceable. You never were. The ache they feel after you're gone is the echo of what they dismissed while you were near. Let it echo. What seemed normal begins to crumble. The harmony that once held a space together dissipates. Conversations become strained. Energy becomes heavier. Misunderstandings multiply. Why? Because the stabilizing presence has left. The chosen one, who held the room together with silent endurance, has stepped away. Now the imbalance can no longer hide behind their covering. People start to remember the stillness they took for granted, the absence of someone who never shouted but always saw, never demanded but always gave. Then it becomes clear the patience of the chosen wasn't passive, it was structural. The invisible framework holding together what others unknowingly tore apart. Wisdom reposes in the heart of the discerning, and even among fools, she lets herself be known. Proverbs 14:33. Their silence now speaks louder than any argument could. Their distance is more instructive than any lecture. This is not revenge or manipulation. It is divine consequence. When love walks away, it doesn't slam the door. It leaves it open, but empty. That emptiness becomes its own teacher. Have you noticed how some only realize your value once you're no longer accessible? Have you stayed in a room that drained you just to keep the peace, until it began to cost your soul? Those who act from love are not seeking applause. They're not performing. They are anchored in something deeper. But make no mistake, chosen ones are not here to be exploited. Their giving is holy, but not infinite. Their love is pure, but not without discernment. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. They understand the sacred currency of presence. Once they detect that their light is being consumed but not respected, they step back not out of bitterness, but wisdom. They know that light must be protected from parasites. That sacred fire cannot be left in spaces where it is consistently dimmed. Singer and activist Leona Lewis once said in an interview, "I had to learn how to walk away from people who drained me, even if I loved them." Her voice is angelic, but her boundary is holy, like many chosen ones. She learned that emotional preservation is part of purpose protection. Ruth, a social worker who cared deeply for a community ravaged by violence, showed up daily, listened without judgment, and offered guidance, but after repeated betrayals and constant resistance to healing, she transferred. Her withdrawal wasn't abandonment, it was self-honoring. Months later, those who mocked her insight started echoing her warnings, but by then, she had moved on. Contrast that with Marcus, a leader in a nonprofit who mistook a chosen colleague's kindness for consent. He kept crossing boundaries, ignoring silent cues. When that colleague resigned, the organization spiraled, projects failed, staff left, morale collapsed. It wasn't incompetence that caused the collapse. It was the loss of invisible alignment. Even the lion, regal and composed, does not roar at every disturbance. But when it walks away from the watering hole, the entire ecosystem shifts. Why? Because its presence signaled order. Without it, chaos finds room to grow. What happens to the balance of power when the one who held it silently decides to leave, just like gravity? The chosen carry a pull that holds things in orbit. You don't always see the force, but you feel its absence the moment it's gone. Their spiritual field is magnetic, not loud, but anchoring. They are the unspoken axis around which others rotate until they remove themselves and the entire orbit begins to wobble. Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Matthew 7:6. You've loved hard, given deeply, but now you must protect wisely. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6:7. Your withdrawal is not spite. It is a spiritual mirror, a final act of clarity, a boundary etched not in anger, but in peace. Your light was never meant to be dimmed for the comfort of others. It was meant to shine. And sometimes, that shine requires distance. The patience you offer is not common, it is sacred. The radiant extension of a soul that still dares to believe in the goodness of others. You've waited through seasons others would have escaped, stood beside those who gave you reasons to walk away. You did it not out of obligation, but because you believed love could still heal, because you saw what others refused to see. Your endurance was not passive, it was prophetic. Yet even patience has a pulse. Even your grace has limits. What happens when sacred patience is met with repeated dishonor? It doesn't explode, it evolves. It matures into discernment, redirects into self-preservation. You begin to recognize that protecting your light sometimes means stepping away from those who treat it casually. Do not give what is holy to dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine. Matthew 7:6. You didn't become cold, you became wise. There is a difference between endurance and enabling. You've learned it the hard way. People forget that even oceans have boundaries. The tide returns only when the moon calls it. You, too, once returned out of loyalty. But now you return only by alignment. The prudent see danger and take refuge. But the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Proverbs 27:12. Has anyone ever asked how much it took from you to finally step back? Do they know the weight of that decision? Those who have experienced your love often confuse your calm with submission. But true spiritual maturity doesn't submit to manipulation. It protects the soul from erosion. You are good, but never to your own destruction. You are patient, but never infinite when you walk away. It is final, not because of pride, but because of protection. You do not leave doors half open. You bless them and shut them gently. There is a time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to be silent and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3:6-7. You've carried others when they could not carry themselves, held emotional weight without acknowledgement, and done it quietly. Your service went unnoticed by the loud, but was deeply felt by the hurting, like the mitochondrial cell in the body. You were the powerhouse behind the structure, working silently yet constantly. But even the strongest cell burns out if overused without rest or renewal. When a chosen one, like you, reaches the breaking point, it doesn't look like rage, it looks like stillness. It looks like no longer answering calls, retreating into spaces where only reverence is allowed, preserving your flame instead of proving your fire. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. If someone has witnessed this shift in you, they've seen spiritual boundaries activated not from spite, but from sacred clarity. Take Desmond Doss, the World War II medic who refused to carry a weapon due to his beliefs. He saved 75 soldiers in Okinawa without firing a shot. His gentleness was perceived as weakness until it became their salvation. What they called cowardice became courage under fire. His strength was not in how he attacked, but in how he stayed. Contrast that with Adam Newman, the founder of WeWork, who built his image on community, empathy, and shared success. But it was laced with grandiosity and manipulation. He burned investor trust, misled stakeholders, and walked away with a fortune while the company crumbled. The aftermath left thousands jobless, and his name became synonymous with betrayal masked as vision. When false empathy is weaponized, its collapse becomes public and permanent. You've probably seen this play out closer than you'd like. Mariana, a young woman, helped care for her cousin through depression, housing him, feeding him, guiding him into therapy. But when she asked for space after years of emotional exhaustion, he guilted her, claiming abandonment. That night, she lit a single candle and sat alone, not in guilt, but in clarity. She had loved well, but love must have boundaries to remain pure. Do they realize how much someone has to care to even reach that level of weariness? You've been that shelter, haven't you? The one others collapsed into. You didn't wait for invitations. You felt need like a whisper in your spirit. Even unspoken pain called you. Your empathy wasn't taught, it was encoded. You didn't rush to fix, you stayed to witness. You didn't offer solutions. You became the space where healing could begin. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:2. But even trees with deep roots can't bear endless winters. There comes a time when giving too much means losing yourself. And that's not love, it's slow erosion. You've learned that to be a fortress for others, you must first fortify your own walls. You've realized that sacred energy must be stewarded, not spent aimlessly. The same way you protected others, you must now protect yourself. Has anyone ever thanked you not for what you did, but for what it cost you? The world is quick to adapt to your consistency and slow to notice your exhaustion. They normalize your sacrifice, but resist your boundaries. They love you for your giving, but question you when you start preserving. But your energy is not public property. Your patience is not an endless well. You are not the emergency room for people who refuse to heal. When you, as a chosen one, finally withdraw, the atmosphere shifts in ways few understand. What seems stable begins to fall apart, not because you brought chaos, but because your quiet presence was the unseen scaffolding holding everything together. The frequency of your spirit had been reinforcing the emotional architecture of the space. Your energy, like a gravitational field, had been silently aligning what was broken, steadying what was shaking. When it disappears, the imbalance becomes visible. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118:22. You were not just present, you were foundational. This is why, when you pull away, relationships, environments, even entire dynamics begin to dissolve, not out of spite, but because what was sustained by grace can no longer survive without it. Have they ever asked themselves why peace left when you did? Have they realized they were thriving on borrowed light? Protecting yourself is not rebellion, it is revelation. The sacred awakening that your light is not for everyone to access. Like the Holy of Holies in the ancient tabernacle, your spirit is holy ground, not open to casual crossing. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? 1 Corinthians 3:16. Spiritual preservation is not selfishness, it's stewardship. You, the chosen, must learn to guard your field like a sacred ecosystem. You don't cut ties out of anger or retreat on a whim. You try, forgive, mediate, hold the tension longer than you should. But when the atmosphere becomes toxic, when your peace is threatened, when your emotional landscape begins to decay, you don't whisper you exit. When you leave, you do so like a gate finally closing after warning after warning. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Matthew 10:14. Even in grief, your decision carries prophetic clarity. You do not return with fragmented energy or half-healed wounds. You bless from afar, but refuse to re-enter places that once drained you. Why? Because you understand now that protecting yourself is not betrayal. It is leadership. It teaches others how to honor presence, cherish peace, and recognize sacredness before it's gone. A man's wisdom gives him patience, It is to his glory to overlook an offense. Proverbs 19:11. But overlooking does not mean allowing destruction. Jane Goodall, the renowned primatologist, once allowed a research partnership to continue despite red flags, believing in the good of the people involved. But when she discovered unethical behavior harming the animals she devoted her life to, she withdrew, exposed it, and restructured her entire foundation. Her silence had been mistaken for passivity until she spoke, and it carried weight rooted in years of sacrifice. Contrast her with Bernie Madoff, who exploited the trust of those who gave him their faith. His quiet persona veiled predation. When truth surfaced, it shattered lives. His downfall was not just financial, it was spiritual. The energy he drained was never his to hold, and in the end, even the prison walls echoed the silence of those he had spiritually robbed. You may know someone like Ethan, who used to light up every room with joy. He carried his friends' heartbreaks like his own, but over time, his laughter faded. Their burdens became expectations. They never asked how he was. One night, he left the group chat no explanation, just absence. A few weeks later, one of them said, "It feels different without him, not better, not worse, just exposed." What happens when your energy becomes the standard but not the priority? Animals understand this. A lioness may nurture, but she also knows when to protect the pride by isolating. A bee pollinates countless flowers, but only returns to the hive that respects its contribution. Trees shed leaves, not because they stop loving the sun, but because they must survive the winter. You, too, must discern your season. Conservation is not cowardice, it's divine intelligence. This is where your healing deepens. You start to realize your presence was a gift, and you begin to treat it like one. Not everyone is meant to receive you. Not every connection deserves renewal. Your silence begins to speak louder than your explanations ever could. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongue. Proverbs 17:28. You become your own sanctuary, your own compass, your own source of validation. If you recognize yourself in this, don't doubt your decision. Your love is precious. Yes, but so is your limit. Your warmth is holy, but your boundary is sacred too. You're not abandoning your light, you're learning to aim it. What once felt like retreat now feels like resurrection. What used to feel like silence now echoes with strength. For the chosen, withdrawal is not the end. It's the beginning of alignment. The silence of a chosen one is not emptiness. It is encoded instruction. It does not signify withdrawal, but sacred redirection. When they become quiet, it is not from the absence of truth, but from the maturity to know that truth. Once ignored, becomes holy ground not to be trampled. Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Matthew 7:6. Their silence is a spiritual seal, marking the place where they once gave generously but were received carelessly. You may think they've gone cold, detached, distant, but have you considered that their silence might be the last act of protection for you and for themselves? Have you ever asked yourself, Why the room feels heavier now that they're no longer explaining their love. Their words were not just sound, they were soul. When soul leaves a space, frequency changes. This is not pride, it is discernment. The chosen have already spoken through their generosity, their presence, their patience. When words fail to touch, they let silence speak. This silence is not hollow, it's surgical. It cuts ties without cruelty, ends cycles without vengeance. It's the sound of spiritual intelligence refusing to perform for people addicted to misunderstanding. Silence for the chosen is not manipulation, it is protection. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. They retreat to honor their emotional field, to cleanse their frequency, to preserve their soul. They're not punishing anyone. They're finally choosing themselves. This shift in energy is felt immediately. What once felt soft now feels tense. What once held peace now echoes disarray. When Steve Jobs left Apple the first time, many dismissed his silence as failure. But in the years that followed, the void of his absence revealed the brilliance they had taken for granted. When he returned, he spoke less and did more. His silence had matured into vision. He no longer fought to be understood. He simply built what would speak louder than explanation. Contrast that with Anna Delvey, who infiltrated elite social circles with charm, but left behind confusion and betrayal. Her silence wasn't holy. It was strategic misdirection. It lacked soul. When the illusion broke, the silence she had once used to mystify became the very thing that condemned her. Because without truth behind it, silence becomes a weapon of deceit. Those around you, like Miriam, the quiet co-worker, always checking in on everyone, might one day stop showing up emotionally, not because she's cruel, but because she spent years being the silent healer in a room that drained her. When she stops texting, stops offering advice, stops smiling through exhaustion, it's not an attitude shift. It's the sound of a soul choosing itself after being stretched too thin. Nature understands this power. A volcano sleeps silently for decades, not from weakness, but from mastery. When it erupts, its silence is reinterpreted. Trees do not shout their growth, but when chopped, the rings reveal the years of quiet strength. Water, too, speaks without words. It nourishes quietly, but when it pulls away, drought follows. So it is with you. Silence is spiritual technology. It filters frequency, purifies atmosphere, protects your peace like a firewall blocks viruses. To remain in noise that dishonors your truth is to corrupt your system. That's why the chosen recalibrate through silence. They do not flee, they refine. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. Proverbs 17:28. Their stillness is not defeat, it is defense. Have they realized what they lost when you stopped trying to explain? Do they know that your absence is not petty but prophetic? There is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3:7. You, beloved, have learned to know the difference. Your silence now teaches more than your words ever did. When the chosen finally leave, they do so without announcement, no drama, no flames, just a sacred absence that echoes louder than presence. When your soul was the gravity holding things together, Your exit becomes the unraveling. The room collapses not because you cursed it, but because your energy no longer sustains what refused to evolve. You don't owe them another conversation, an explanation to people committed to not hearing you. You owe yourself peace. If that peace requires silence, then speak nothing, and let the frequency of your healing do the work. They are not about threats. They do not need to be. They do not chase respect. They embody it. They have no desire to prove themselves in loud rooms because they know what God whispered in quiet ones. They understand that time is the ultimate revealer. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. Luke 8:17. Absence to them is not silence. It is sacred revelation. A courtroom where time testifies, energy speaks, and illusion crumbles. Have you watched someone realize your absence was never punishment, but prophecy? Have you stepped back and witnessed how loud your silence became in a room that once dismissed your voice for the chosen? Presence was never about being seen. It was about anchoring spiritual order. When they leave, the order shifts. This silence is not indifference or emotional shutdown. It is often the final and highest form of self-love, the quiet choosing of one's soul after years of loud self-abandonment. It is when a chosen one wakes up and realizes they are not responsible for keeping broken systems functioning. They deserve real connection, not convenient access, rest, not performance. When that realization takes root, they walk away, not in bitterness, but in wholeness, even in withdrawal. The chosen continue teaching. Their absence is still an active force. Their vibration continues to echo through every space they once held. Adele. After disappearing from the public eye to heal, returned not with apology, but with power. Her silence was not disappearance. It was reassembly. Her return carried weight because it followed holy withdrawal. Meanwhile, Lance Armstrong, once a symbol of resilience and victory, tried to protect a fabricated legacy through prolonged silence, but that silence lacked integrity. When the truth surfaced, it was not just his confession, but the years of calculated denial that spoke volumes. When the chosen are silent, it heals. When the deceivers are silent, it corrupts. You may know someone like Katya, who once held everyone together with her warmth. When she stopped showing up, stopped answering the calls that drained her, something shifted, not because she stopped caring, but because she started caring for herself. She chose peace over obligation, clarity over confusion, silence over noise. Silence is not escape, it's elevation. Like the eagle that soars above the storm rather than battling it, the chosen one rises. The silence becomes a spiritual cocoon where transformation occurs unseen. This is emotional frequency modulation, sacred boundary architecture, divine strategy. Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. Proverbs 17:1. The chosen understand that no connection is worth their peace. That love without truth is just control with good PR. That companionship without respect is not intimacy, it's imprisonment. They release it without spectacle, without resentment. Have you learned to interpret your silence as strength instead of shame? Do you know that leaving without yelling is not weakness? It's spiritual rank. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Stillness is a weapon. Peace is a rebuke. Presence can convict, but absence becomes the loudest sermon when love has been squandered. If you've remained silent after explaining yourself 100 times, you did not lose your voice, you reclaimed your spirit. That quiet you chose was not withdrawal, it was wisdom. That space you created was not abandonment, it was alignment. If you felt the silence of someone whose presence once carried safety, you now know the soul speaks loudest when it stops trying to be heard. Silence, when chosen with love, becomes the purest form of truth, not to punish, not to guilt, but to restore the sacred order that dishonor once distorted. There are moments in a chosen one's life when they must make the hardest choice of all to choose themselves. Not because they want to withdraw from the world, but because they understand they can no longer dim their light so others can shine. They can no longer hurt themselves just to make someone else comfortable. That choice doesn't come from pride. It comes from exhaustion, from a soul that has given, listened, carried too much, deep down. All it ever wanted was to be seen the way it saw others, longed for reciprocity, not worship, not perfection, just truth. Can you remember the last time you stayed too long where your light was only consumed, not honored? The chosen one loves with presence, patience, full surrender, but they also need to be loved with care. When they realize they are always giving, always yielding, always waiting while the other only receives, the wait becomes unsustainable. The soul screams in silence. The body feels it in fatigue, tension, headaches. The mind, no matter how rational, realizes something is out of balance. Then, with the same gentleness with which they gave themselves, the chosen one starts to retreat slowly, quietly, without warning, without anger, just with awareness. It was what Naomi Osaka did when she stepped back from the tennis courts, not because she was weak, but because she knew her inner peace was more sacred than public performance. That moment wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. Those used to their constant presence, their unconditional giving, are surprised when the chosen one puts themselves first. The dynamic shifts. They begin to filter, observe, protect their energy not out of spite, but because the cycle has ended. This new position doesn't make them cold. They remain empathetic, loving, deep, but now with boundaries, discernment, clarity. They learn that those who truly deserve their light will recognize it and take care never to let it go dim. Do you still confuse unconditional love with unconditional access? What once was emotional chaos becomes silent wisdom. What was insistence becomes calm observation. What was blind hope becomes sharp perception. The chosen one doesn't stop loving. They learn to love better, starting with themselves. In this new phase, they attract different connections, people who don't drain them but add to them, who don't demand but give, who aren't intimidated by their intensity but are drawn to it, who see the value of the soul they carry. Taylor Zakar Perez, a rising actor once overlooked, speaks openly about surrounding himself now with people who protect his energy, not just praise his success. Like many chosen ones, he learned through the pain of overgiving that discernment is sacred. When a chosen one meets another awakened heart, everything changes. There is no power struggle, no mind games, no fear of being too much. There is alignment, peace, truth, because the energy finally finds shelter, a place where it doesn't need to hide or explain, a place where it can just be. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Psalm 27:10. That divine reception mirrors what happens when the chosen find someone who sees them spiritually. If you're still in the phase of cutting ties, stepping back, or staying silent, don't blame yourself. You're making space for this new cycle to begin, a cycle where your light will be respected, your intuition heard, your heart held. How long will you keep watering ground that refuses to grow anything back? Everything you're feeling is part of the path. You haven't lost your kindness. You've learned to protect it. You haven't stopped loving. You're loving with more awareness now. That is growth, spiritual maturity. What sets the chosen ones apart? The ability to keep walking in faith, even when the world tries to silence them. Judas Iscariot walked next to the truth, but never embraced it. Proximity never guaranteed alignment. Don't mistake the presence of someone in your life for their understanding of your worth. Your light isn't inconvenient, it's revealing. And not everyone is ready for that. But those who are will see you with the eyes of the soul and care for you the way you deserve. That's what this has been about: loving without losing yourself, giving without breaking, feeling deeply and knowing when to stop. Chosen ones weren't born to dim themselves for anyone. They were born to shine and to know when it's time to retreat. In quietness and trust is your strength. Isaiah 30:15. That verse isn't poetic, it's prophetic. Your silence is not abandonment, it's divine alignment. Chosen one, your kindness was never weakness, it was restraint. The warmth you carry, the gentleness in your tone, the compassion in your eyes. These are not signs of passivity, but evidence of your alignment with God's heart. When someone tries to manipulate or challenge you, they find out quickly. Beneath that kind is a sword of truth not everyone can handle. That's why they fear you, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. Your love doesn't come with manipulation. Your forgiveness doesn't come with naivety. People expect kindness to mean compliance, but with you, it means conviction. When you draw the line, heaven backs it. When you walk away, it's not pettiness, it's prophetic protection. Let this be your sacred reminder. Being kind doesn't mean being accessible to chaos. God gave you a soft heart, but also spiritual armor. You are loving, but you are not to be played with. Those who tried to exploit your warmth eventually learned that peaceful doesn't mean powerless. Say it today with conviction: I am kind, and I am covered. You don't need to explain yourself to people who only love the parts of you they could manipulate. Your purity exposes their control. Your discernment disrupts their tactics. And your love, when rooted in truth, becomes a holy force that breaks chains. If this word resonated with you, I invite you to stay connected by visiting my YouTube channel, where I share powerful, spirit-led teachings for chosen ones like you. These messages are crafted to validate your experience, protect your heart, and activate your divine authority. You're not too soft, you're strategically balanced, and the world needs what you carry. If this blessed you, let it be a moment of agreement. Tap the like button to affirm what you already know in your spirit. Share it with someone who has been called too nice for too long and is finally reclaiming their voice. Comment below with a declaration like, "My kindness is strength, not submission," and subscribe with notifications on, because each word released is building your confidence, clarity, and capacity. To every person who's shown support through super thanks, your prayers, or simply receiving this in silence, I'm deeply grateful. Whether you give or just receive, you are part of this mission. Your presence is felt. Your hunger for truth matters, and heaven is honoring it in ways seen and unseen. Until we meet again, stay tender where it counts and fearless where it's necessary. Let your kindness remain sacred, but let your boundaries remain guarded. Let your words carry softness and your silence carry weight. When a chosen one is both kind and clear, everything false trembles. May God bless your voice with boldness, your heart with peace, your steps with purpose, and your space with divine protection. I'll see you in the next video.